And let's continue our conversation with former New York Police Commissioner and the former Iraq Interim Minister of Interior, Bernard Kerik. He joins us live from Newsmax, Washington. Also with us tonight, Skyping from Tampa, Florida, former intelligence officer and former advisor to General David Petraeus, Colonel Derek Harvey. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us here tonight on Newsmax Prime.
Thanks,
Guys, a former Secret Service agent assigned to the protective detail of President Obama was on Fox News Sunday last night. He says political correctness has put a limitation to U.S. intelligence gathering and investigations. Take a listen.
There is enormous political pressure, and I'm getting this from a lot of my law enforcement sources, enormous political pressure when a potential terrorist case involves someone who may be Islamic to handle the case differently than if it were, say, a case for someone of another religion. That political pressure has real-world effects. I'm sure there's someone in the FBI who knew this man was a danger, and there may have been some political pressure to kind of make this, make this go away because they didn't have any direct red flag or any direct sign.
Colonel, I want to start with you. What is your reaction? Do you agree? Are there too many restrictions on the FBI and other agencies because of political correctness?
What I hear from my FBI sources and others in law enforcement is that's exactly the case, that the policies that are in place, driven by politics, are undermining the ability of investigators to take the leads to their natural sources. When I have worked these types of issues overseas, when you have a bombing and you know the source, you can find the mosque, and very often host countries, they go to the same place. They go to the mosque, they go to the imam, the same thing in France and Belgium, because that's where associations are made, and that's quite often where the fostering or the development of extremist ideology is penetrating the community. And it motivates these people and creates an environment in which these types of people become enabled. And
we only have about 30 seconds remaining in this segment. So, Bernard, I want to get your thoughts on this, your reaction real quickly. Comey said they're conducting hundreds and hundreds of these types of investigations all across the country. Do they have enough resources?
No, I don't think they have enough resources. I think I wrote about this morning. I think the FBI, the director, has been requesting additional resources and staffing. They've got 14,000 agents. They have over 1,000 of these specific types of cases they're looking at. I think this has to be addressed, and Congress has to consider getting them more resources.
Right. And we're going to talk much more about that in our segment coming up. We want to discuss that article that you did for our parent website, Newsmax.com. You're watching Newsmax Prime. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Newsmax Prime. We're going to be rejoined once again with Bernard Kerik and also former intelligence officer Colonel Derek Harvey. But right now, we want to hear from you. The phone number is 1-877-NEWSMAX. First now, let's, there you have it. Again, 877-639-7629 is the number to call. Let's bring back our guests once again. Thank you, gentlemen, for sticking around. And Bernard, we had mentioned the very insightful article that you did. You talk about lack of communication, lack of resources. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But first, we want to go to the phone lines. Standing by from Garden City, New York is Marcia. Marcia, thank you for joining us here on Newsmax Prime. What is your question or comment?
Hi, Madeline. Good evening. I first want to say I think Donald Trump is right on about this, because there's only one or two ways you can go with this kind of investigation into terrorists, and that is either you have to increase the amount of people, FBI and investigative people, to cover these people that are on lists that we suspect could be terrorists, or if you can't increase that number, then you have to stop the flow of Muslims that are coming in and not at least find out what their background is and what their intentions are. You can't just keep letting people come in without some kind of check on it, or you're going to have people fall through the cracks like this. There's only one or two ways you can go here. I'd like to hear what the gentlemen have to say about that.
Right, and actually I'm glad that you brought that up, Marcia. You talk about increasing the number of agents, and that's something, Bernard, that you brought up in your article. I believe you said there are 14,000 FBI agents as compared to 800,000 local and state law enforcement. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and that's the reason behind the article. I think if the FBI was working in conjunction with local police agencies when they go out to interview these guys, it would be extremely important for the community police where these people live to know that they could be a possible suspect, a person that is a supporter or a sympathizer. If I'm a cop on patrol and I'm going into an apartment building, I'd really want to know that there's a guy in there that may be responsible for some type of terroristic activity. And right now, the FBI doesn't take the local police with them unless they're assigned to a joint terrorist task force. You have 800,000 cops in this country. They could be the eyes and ears of the FBI when those inquiries turn stale or they come to an abrupt end. Those cops are there every day in that community.
We now also want to go to Robbie, who's calling us from Clinton, North Carolina. What's your question or comment?
Yes, I'd first like to say I'm from Clinton and not for Clinton. I am a Donald Trump supporter, and I agree 100% with Donald Trump. We need to have a temporary ban on all Muslims coming in until we get our borders secure and until we have a way of tracking them.
That was very clever, by the way, with the Clinton comment that you made. Let's go to Colonel Harvey about that. Donald Trump has been reiterating once again his temporary ban on Muslims entering this country, something that he has received criticism from Republicans and Democrats as well. Is this something that's even feasible? And bear in mind that this shooter in Orlando was an American-born Muslim. Your take, General.
Miranda, I think it's very important to keep in mind one thing. In order to do the background checks on the refugees and immigrants coming from particular countries like Syria, Iraq, and a good part of the Middle East today, there is not a database and a sourcing capability that would allow us to have any reliability about who these people are, whether you take 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. And my experience and the experience of people who have been working these issues hard is that there's just not the data available. And it is very easy to work their way through this process. It just takes patience. We can have people in prison for years trying to do all the work to figure out who they really are, what their motivation is. And we are unable, and we wind up releasing people who, it turned out, were hardcore Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda in Iraq operatives. We do not have a good background check process in place to verify who these people are.
We now want to go to Larry, who's in New Haven, Indiana. Larry, what's your question or comment?
Well, my comment is I do believe that Donald Trump is correct. I know that there must be thousands and tens of thousands of Syrians and people that are in fear for their lives to come to our country. But if it's allowed that they come in, and, you know, the communists in Vietnam used to run in three-man cells. If we get 3 to 6 to 9 people, what havoc the American people would have. I agree. I believe they're at civil war and they have these problems that they should try to take care of their problems at home, and then we can open our borders to them. I am not against the Syrian people and the people that's affected by this, but at the same time, we cannot take the chance on somebody else's lives here in this country. I'm 70 years old. I have concern for my children and my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and my neighbors. So I agree with Trump. I think that there should be a very strict concern to this. You know, I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, drastic situation calls for drastic measures, and some people get hurt doing this. Why should us Americans be the ones to get hurt?
And you bring up a valid point. We heard what Colonel Harvey had to say. Bernard, I want you to weigh in on what you just heard Larry say from New Haven, Indiana.
You know what, Miranda? We are one of the biggest receivers of immigrants from around the world, more than any other country in the world, probably. Okay? We don't want anybody in this country that's going to harm the country or kill our people or be a threat to our national security. No one. I don't care if they're from the Middle East. I don't care if they're from Europe, from Russia, China. It doesn't make any difference. I think it's all a matter of wording. We don't want anybody in this country that we cannot vet properly. If we can't identify who they are, where they come from, where they've been, what their real intent on coming here is, we don't want them here. And unfortunately, we have this Syrian immigration problem with Syrian nationals that are coming, refugees that are coming out of Syria. We don't have paperwork on them. We don't have a database to identify where they're coming from. We don't have diplomatic relations with Syria to determine who they are and where they came from. And yet there are people in the United States, in this administration, that thinks that's okay. That's not okay.
And again, we want to reiterate that the shooter was American-born. Religion's been a topic that's come up today, but earlier today, President Obama spoke about the mass killing in Orlando. Again, the worst in U.S. history. He took this opportunity, though, to make it about gun control. Here's what he had to say.
We are also going to have to make sure that we think about the risks we are willing to take by being so lax in how we make very powerful firearms available to people in this country.
President Obama says a lack of gun control contributed to these killings, but how does a man who is on a watch list get his hands on guns legally, and is gun control really the answer? Let's go to you, Colonel Harvey.
Well, you know, I've heard a number of groups talk about making some tweaks to the watch list and that type of thing. And the challenge there is, again, I think about resources and policy and how it would be executed. You know, there are many, many people on that watch list who should never be there. There are congressmen who've been on the watch list, professors, law enforcement people, military people with top secret and higher security clearances. The watch list is just full of so many errors, so that's one problem. You're going to have due process in place. But there should be a procedure for something like that, for a narrow band and a very narrow change. Other than that, you know, France, which has very restrictive gun control measures, has had some of the worst terrorism strikes with people using semi-automatic weapons. It's not an answer in and of itself.
Bernard, I want to get the last 30 seconds to you, your reaction.
Miranda, if you apply for a credit card, with a push of a button, the banking industry can tell you whether you're authorized or not authorized. I find it hard to believe that in the 21st century, there is no flagging mechanism for somebody that goes out to buy a gun. They apply for the weapon, there's a background done, and you mean to tell me there's not a flagging mechanism that notifies the Bureau or the local police department to make a phone call, go out and check, find out what the guy's doing? That's hard to believe. And if it's not happening, it should be happening.
Well, we might see something happen after this. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Maureen.
We now want to get your take on some of the comments that you've heard tonight. Again, the phone number is 1-877-NEWSMAX. Give us a call. Be a part of the conversation. We'll be right back with Diamond and Silk.